All right, let's get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. For those of you who I haven't had the opportunity to meet, I am Danielle Patterson, the CEO of Family Office List, and I am very thrilled to have you here today. This year, we launched our MasterClass series and have had 3 incredible speakers so far this month, and we're closing out January on a high note today, featuring Angelo Robles. For those who aren't familiar with Angelo's work, he is not just a seasoned pro in the family office world, but he is a trailblazer who's been redefining the game for years. With a knack for creating and reimagining family offices for some of the world's most successful families, Angelo is all about building exceptionally dynamic and engaging spaces. His expertise covers everything from human wisdom to AI enhancements, making him a true pioneer in the field. We'll share more about his work, including his bio and access to the master classes he's been offering following the webinar. We'll also include a link to the recording. And stay tuned through the end because we will be awarding a fun prize from one of our newest partners, Gift Suite. And if you're not familiar with Gift Suite, they are a boutique gift giver. They're a minority female-owned boutique based in Los Angeles, and they work with top-tier clients to create and send thoughtful, values-based, and eco-friendly luxury gifts. In addition to working with large tech companies and financial businesses, they fill a unique niche of working with international companies on sending gifts to their US-based clients. So yes, lucky participant will win that at the end. And today's presentation will be 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A. And Angelo has prepared a tremendous slide deck for you all. And I think he could present, I think his masterclass is around 28 hours. So we've consolidated this into just a really brief but very engaging presentation. So we'll be sure to leave time for Q&A. Feel free to drop those below and we'll make sure to make time at the end. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to Angelo.
And thank you, Danielle. And you're very kind with the word wisdom, but I do appreciate you and appreciate your kind words. And everyone, what I'm doing is I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint and I'm going to make it larger on screen. Give me 2 seconds, enter full screen, and probably a little crisper if I click play. All right. And if anything is not working on the visual or audio, definitely notice such in Q&A or the chat feature, but I think we're good. And I'm going to be really sure. I'm going to go on my phone, hey Siri, put on do not disturb. Because sometimes at inopportune times with Murphy's Law, a call comes in and would shrink the screen or do something quirky. So I think I took care of that. So first of all, I'd love to thank, I want to thank Danielle Patterson. I think she's awesome what she's doing. We should all give her a hand from afar. I appreciate you hosting an educational series, a masterclass forum. And I feel honored to be, I don't know, maybe I'm the first one in the series. So to give you all a little bit of context, and maybe this screen kind of says it all. So first, let me give a little bit of the context of my background, because I didn't want Danielle to waste 2 or 3 minutes on it. Many of you know me as being the founder and longtime CEO at Family Office Association, something that I did love. After many a year, what feels like decades, I sold my positions about a year ago. I wish the new team nothing but the best, but I'm very excited to have taken finally some time off to travel the world, meet with amazing family offices, relaunch my organization out of a combination of Greenwich and Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and do what I love to do, which a large part of it is education. I love immersive education. So I created Family Office Masterclass, and I love to teach. Now, my core programs are 24 hours plus each module. It gets intense. I have a shortened one that I'm rolling out that's only 4 hours. So please excuse me in this one of only about 45 minutes, then some Q&A. It is going to go quick. I would love to bring in my fellow guest lecturers, do case studies, have it more immersive. We just don't have the time for that. So this is a little bit of a snippet. So on that note, let's do it. I'm going to skip over quickly the curriculum. And yeah, we're going to try to cover all that in 42 minutes. I don't know if that's going to happen. So, it is cycling through the same things. Why is it doing that? Okay. I do have a thought. Give me 1 second. So the only people who achieve much are those that actually take action when times are, quote unquote, why don't we go with the verbiage, less favorable? So here's something that I realized. This is the long form, like 24-hour instructional PowerPoint. I don't know how that happened. There we go. Now we got the correct one. Let me pull up into here. And what I may do is I may not keep it big screen so we can move through it a little quicker. Okay, a masterclass is far more than what a lecturer teaches. It is everything you could imagine, because you, with your own brain, your own imagination, how you hear things, how you process information, what you see, could even be different than my perspective of it. Therefore, I have an opportunity to learn from you. I've learned this from billionaires. Our beliefs should change. Strong opinions informing a thesis, absolutely, think for yourself, but often weakly held. Just like playing poker, conditions change. And the best families and family offices, and we're going to talk about even one family today that goes back 1,100 years in Europe, of course, of effectively continuous wealth and lessons learned. Okay, that was faster. So I'm going to start really basic, but it's going to progress and fast. A single family office is an entity created by one family. I hold to the mantra of single family office, with great people and resources dedicated internally and exclusively to that one family. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. The single family office has a hard task. It must proactively coordinate internal and external, we're going to get to that, resources to manage the wealth and resources. Now, I'm big. The family is already rich. They probably want to stay that way. They're very concerned about risk and challenges and evaluating these risks. You have investment, liquidity, counterparty, leverage, operational, geopolitical. I could go on and on and on. In today's world, where you can't hide if you liquidated a company, if you're successful, you are absolutely a target. So the family office must mitigate and manage all those risks, some that happen every day that the family probably doesn't even know about. But you, as a family office executive, have to be very familiar. You need to consider what ifs, and this is more forward thinking. We're going to get to some of this shortly. Navigate black swans and procure positive future outcomes. Yeah, the single family office executive role is probably no glory and a lot of challenge. There's a great deep thinker, German, but he's based in the UK. Shout out to him, and that would, by the way, be Nick von Einern. And he talks about where there's light, where we could see something, there are shadows. And that goes back to what I said earlier about risk, and I'm a big risk guy. Risk identification, risk analysis, and optimal risk responses. It's way more than financial risk. It's operational and behavioral. And those are going to be intra-family. Now, this would be an example after setting a deeper stage where I would, in my programs, where I got multiple hours, I bring on Nick von Einern. I bring on a generational family member, and we probably do a 1-hour dive just in this topic alone. So maybe I could simplify it. A single family office really is charged at the end of the day with procuring family continuity generationally across all challenges. According to the UBS Global Family Office Report from last year, the main purpose of a family office in the US is to support generational wealth transfer. It also talks about the percentage that had a wealth succession plan in place, and the percentage that have a family office succession plan in place. It puts that at 38%, and that sounds awful high to me. Now, I'm going to get into, do you want a reality check? I don't think most family offices are really that good. Now, that may not be statistically an accurate comment. Most are mediocre. It kind of makes no sense. But the benchmarking in a family office and the understanding of the goals, and then to have quantifiable results is very, very complex. But you could do incredible best practices and gauge the results against the goal. Those are all things in our remaining, 37 minutes that we're going to try to dive into. So you all heard by now, I believe Jay Hughes probably popularized it decades ago here in the US. If you don't know who Jay Hughes is, shame on you. Go to Amazon and buy his books right now. He's an iconic, a legendary figure. The old adage of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. I've traveled the world, especially in the last year. I came back from like a month in Europe, meeting with amazing families, some that have overcome that challenge, the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority, do not. And it has little to do with taxation and investing, but it could. Those are important. And we're going to briefly get to some of those topics as well. Emphasize the value. If you're looking to be in a family office, work in one, or existing, you already do, the value of preparing the family. That makes them anti-fragile, not just you protecting them. Now, again, in 36 more minutes, without me bringing in guest outside lecturers and going back and forth with actual families that have been through it. And I've had Nassim Taleb talk before. Maybe I could get him to one of my programs talking about anti-fragility. That's a very important part, preparing the family. So the paths to new ideas in this community, I mean, any new idea kind of looks unpromising. So you need to be bold. So one thing that I did in a MasterClass was, as a family office executive or family, come at me with your crazy ideas. And these were 3 of them. And they kind of all sound crazy. Can AI replace the CEO? My God, not even someone under that in the family office? Should an SFO go public as a public company? What? And I guess channeling Elon, family offices, space, and Mars. Here's what I guarantee you, especially number 1 and number 3. All 3 of these things will happen. It's just a matter of when. Just like any investment or anything effectively goes to zero in a long enough time horizon. Is that time horizon 1 year? Or is it 100 years? And no, the answer is not in between. It's going to be far, far sooner. Times are changing. Original ideas don't come from trying to have original ideas. Paul Graham is an iconic Silicon Valley legend, incubator, and deep thinker and philosopher. They come from trying to build or understand something slightly too difficult. How you reach a level of flow is you do have to stretch your capability to be able to do more than you think you could and to challenge yourself. Now, I've been talking about forever. An analogy I give is LeBron James, a Michael Jordan. That's innate talent and the right things that come together, the right mental discipline. But if you take the 15th person on an NBA bench, they're never going to be that. It's too competitive with millions of people playing, with statistical analysis. Michael Jordan, LeBron James are just better. And you could be the 15th man on a bench. No matter what you do, no matter what you eat, no matter who's your coach, you're never going to even come close to being who they are. But I got good news for you in the family office world. It's not quite that level of competition. It's not quite that level of innate capability. You could put in the work and you could work up from what might be mediocre. It's your competency. It's your ability to identify blind spots and moving ego aside. Ray Dalio talks about that. In other words, what I'm trying to say is you could be great. You could be 1% if you really want to be. Wealthy families, as I hinted earlier, face a tremendous amount of risk. My God, this is only a tiny amount. It's far more than this. We don't have the time to go through each one, bring in an independent expert, and do deep dives. We are going to pick out one or two upcoming. I'm big on geopolitics. And finally, this past year, I was proven right. As what? The UBS report, the BlackRock report, the Goldman Sachs report, the Northern Trust report, all on family offices in their research collectively with over 1,000 real single family office is geopolitics is the number one concern, followed by recession and then rising inflation. Recession might have been slightly more of a concern than geopolitics in the US only. I am telling you, the biggest families I deal with, deca-billionaire families, geopolitics, geopolitics, geopolitics. They're scared to death. If you don't follow Laura Nevick, I'll write down her name and start to follow her blogs and stuff. She's really good. She agrees effectively with me and with the studies. Right now, geopolitics is number one, but there's so much more. She mentioned stubborn inflation, wealthy families having to consider how to transfer their wealth. What did I mention earlier with the UBS report of effectively the number one goal of most family offices? You do have to be concerned about brand, protecting reputation, maintaining confidentiality. Oh, and by the way, the family office itself has their own problems. Attracting and retaining talent. And I know probably the most common question from many of you, which I would love to cover, but I could do a 4-hour masterclass about it, is going to be compensation in the family office another time. Cybersecurity, mounting costs, digitalization. You may only get one crack at working in a family office. If you mess it up, you might be done. Now that may cause you to freeze up and not take certain risks, but these are issues that is going to be a deep dive that we'll see how much we could cover. Okay, I mean, not to get too dark, not every family or family enterprise is going to thrive. They're not even going to survive turbulent times. Forget about 3 generations. What are we going through now? When I come back from, I'm going to get to my Europe trip in a second, and my interview with Octavian Pilati from, again, an 1,100-year-old family. Why don't I save some of that for that one? So here's what one 30-year family office veteran told me. Effectively, the big 3 for him, this may not be for the family that you may represent or you as a family member, managing the stability and performance of a family's financial assets, supporting generational wealth transfer. Generally, those 2, you may flip the order, are 90% of the time going to be the big 2. And he mentioned a third one, proactively protecting the family brand. But is that really a surprise? So no surprise to all of you. Managing the stability and performance of the assets and supporting generational wealth transfer is 1 and 2. One of my wiseacre family office executives, Angelo, avoiding stupid mistakes is more important than being smart. So when I was a little bit more of an advanced chess player, that's kind of what my mentor was teaching me as well. I don't know if it's great advice. Like, I may disagree with him. Of course, avoiding stupid mistakes is really important. But does that freeze you up? And we're going to get to something shortly that's going to talk about historian and revolutionary. So I'm not always sure that that's the great advice, but it probably is the safer bet in most family offices. So this generational family member, after I came back from Europe and he saw some of my interviews, said, you know what? There's multiple families in the US now that have enough wealth to last, I mean, literally for 1,000 years. Now, if you hedge and mitigate risk. And all this is even probably harder than actually creating the great wealth. Okay, so I mentioned my trip to Europe, including going back there for a good amount of time this December. One of my interviews, it's up on my family office TV channel, is with Octavian Pilati. He's a younger, I would say probably early 30s. So he's a millennial, generational family member. In my programs, we'll bring him on live and others and go a little back and forth, but I'm going to highlight his core points. He does talk about emotional stability and unity in families, obviously, but sometimes the obvious needs to be stated. By the way, many of you on the executive side are going to say, oh God, is Angelo going to talk a lot about governance, a lot about dynamics, a lot about communication with the family? Oh, that's so boring. Oh my God, that's not my job. You're kind of correct and not correct. How families meet the challenge of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations is going to be things intra-family. It's debatable. It depends on the family and your role as an executive, whether it's your role to help fuel the benefits of that. Some of you are going to say, nope, I'm just a professional doing what I do. That's not my role. And others that I think are more holistic and encompassing will at least be familiar with it, know some of the thought leaders around it, and work with the family. If you care more than just about your role over the next 1 or 10 years, but you really care about the family, these are all things that are going to be very, very important. Okay, so here's a little bit of insight. So he noted back in the day, what the family did was they went into government, they went into the military, and they went into the clergy. Now, they probably did those things because that helped to then maintain both power and influence over people. We're going to get to how that has adapted in today's world in 2 seconds. So, assets that they've owned over many a year: land, art, gold, and gems. I think those are kind of still pretty timeless. Am I going to put 100% of my assets in that? Of course not. But am I going to put a percentage collectively? Maybe it's 5 or 7%. When I was in Austria, there was one example we gave with a gem dealer. In one hand, I could hold about 700 million USD of value. And that's pretty portable. And yes, in case you're wondering, one of my families does run around the world in their suits and sports jackets with probably about 10 or $15 million laced up and sewn in their suit. If I told you his name, God forbid, there'll be someone probably looking to mug him the next time he goes to an airport. So of course I'm not going to do that. What has replaced a little bit the old guard of government, military, and clergy for the super rich? Meaning what influences people? It still is government. That still is human nature of raw power, of sometimes disaster, of conflict, of emotions. But now media influences people. Investments in banking and philanthropy. Oh, I could go deep into that one. Why don't we keep that one quiet for a different time? That one you're going to need the 26-hour class on. Every problem consumes time and energy. That equates to resources, aka money. Now, here's the problem. Not procuring the best solutions can be devastating and not known until sometimes well after the fact. So identifying the right problems is very, very important. Well, I talked to the principal and this is the task and this is a problem. It's deeper than that. You have to know the questions to ask, get clarity, have it in writing. We're not going to have obviously time to do a deep dive into that, but that's very important. Because even worse is solving the wrong problem is tantamount to not solving the real true problem at all. So in case some of you are wondering, I do dabble in philosophy. I like to consider myself somewhat of a deeper and critical thinker. And I think everything Peter Drucker did is amazing, and the work of Jim Collins is great. So if I could channel some of the great Peter Drucker and Jim Collins into being a little bit more critical thinking and deeper thinking to be great in the family office world, that effectively is my life's passion. So in the face of crisis, so the allure of the familiar can be comforting, but this is where you need to be able to make assumptions and strategies that what you're doing now may not hold up in the face of crisis and profound shifts. And the geopolitical issues that we'll hint at a little bit coming up shortly are all going to be grave challenges. The three big things that determine macro a successful family office: people, definitively number one, probably 85%. And you can mix number 2 and 3, technology and systems. I could redefine systems as effectively, broadly, processes, best practices, standard operating procedures. I'm going to lump it into systems. You could even ignore the second and third and just focus on people. That is definitively going to be number 1. So are you a historian or a revolutionary? Most of you, or most in the family office, are kind of neither. I think it's good to take a stand. So I would maybe look at, in the NFL, but he's no longer the coach of the Patriots, Bill Belichick literally is, per his college at Wesleyan here in the great state of Connecticut, a historian. And I think that's great to understand and have mentorship, even those that have passed, but through their books and their learning of great deep thinkers, philosophers, people, the person that effectively ran Frederick Gates, the first SFO in America for the Rockefeller families in the 80s. You should learn about them. You should learn how they process information, how they made decisions, how they handle stress. I think it's very important to actually be a historian. But if you're only a historian, you got to have some revolutionary in you. You got to be able to be a visionary, to kind of see around corners. And I think that's very, very important. How about we go with this? Be 70% a historian and 30% a revolutionary. There's no statues to committees. There's only statues to amazing individuals. One person in a family office could change everything. Everything. You can be that person. I want you to think big. I want family offices to be great. I don't want them to be mediocre. And I want to help them in any way that I could. I want to help the family and I want to help the executive. I think that most of the executives have it in them to be great. It's just understanding the best practices, practical strategies, some of the right connectivity, and the opportunities to take the right steps to move forward. Focus, I said this before, it needs to be repeated again. Focus on identifying the right problems or opportunities can be more impactful than finding solutions to existing problems. Some of that relates to simply being a detective and knowing how to ask questions. Some of that relates to revolutionary. And this would also be an example. Maybe we bring in an incredible person that we do half an hour to an hour, understanding the process that you go through with the family and effectively uncovering what the right problems are. I'm going to recommend this guy. If those of you who don't know him, get to know him. Former Navy SEAL legend Jocko Willink has an ultra popular podcast and book called Extreme Ownership. He also has TED videos, and you could watch a whole bunch of things. Take the team that takes ownership of the problem gets solved. Take responsibility for it. This is not a 9-to-5 job. Yeah, you do take it home. You're getting paid well or should be getting paid well. The family office rarely has a how problem. They have a who problem. That's a people issue. And again, I'm not saying the current people don't have it inside them. They just may need a little bit of mentorship and guidance. The family often has a committee of boards, advisory board. The family office should have a sounding board as well from creative, deep thinkers with connectivity around the community. I mean, is the family legacy continuity safe? The challenge is this is more of a burden. It's perceived by the family that wants to be generational. And a lot of family office executives don't look that long term. But you got to think about what Rumsfeld mentioned, right? The known knowns and the unknown unknowns. Wicked problems are effectively, in the scientific world, I mean, to some degree, kind of problems that can't be solved. Like what happens if there is a solar storm, a massive nuclear war, or even probably more realistic, a derivatives collapse. It's probably over. I mean, forget about obviously a solar storm or the nuclear war. That really would be it. But even something like a derivative collapse, think of all the counterparty risk. Well, you don't even think about that you guys have as LP investors, as equity investors. You don't want to know what I've learned in terms of what could go wrong. So I did develop in my 2 anchor master classes, 26 plus hours on sovereign risk and disaster preparedness. That's after a consulting assignment I did for a mega, and I mean a mega family. And that was 3 years ago. It's been updated by me 100 times since then. I'm probably going to skip over this one. This will get a little bit into, I mean, what happens if US dollar hegemony, that's how I pronounce it, it collapses 50%? What happens if bank accounts are frozen or banks go under? Oh, that never happens. It happened a couple of times last year with big banks. There's lots that could go wrong. When I go to Europe and I go to Asia and I go to the Middle East, they know this stuff. And LATAM, oh my God, like they know everything could go wrong. I want to get rid of all counterparty risk. Now, that's kind of impossible, but we'll get maybe a pinch into that. I mean, if you wanted to know the 7, to me, it's boring, but the 7 core areas that family offices most focus on, and not really any specific order: mitigating taxes, estate planning, asset protection, investments, philanthropy, educating the rising generation, and some single family offices, their core purpose effectively is more as a service and concierge-centric SFO. That's probably starting to rise, I would say, in popularity. Again, I'm a believer the family's already rich. I totally get it. They get an overly conservative return. They make tax mistakes. They have family members pulling at the assets. That money's going to dissipate. I hear you. But that's more of a longer term concern. Right now, the world is turning upside down. So you do have to look at how stable and solvent is your government. The US government's got a $33 trillion deficit. We have wicked civil unrest. We have a massive conflict happening at the southern border. Like, we have 2 wars that we're somewhat putting our nose in and involved. There's a lot of problems here. I know you could go back and say, look at every decade, there's always problems. It just appears like things are a little worse and a little bit more challenging. Again, some things we just don't have the time for, which is why perhaps the businesses to survive a great event is written in the book, The Great Taking. You got to read, you got to follow the right people. And then I reach out to them and I get to know them a little bit personally. Sometimes they don't want to come on more publicly, but I usually get to have a great conversation with them and get to do deeper dives. The assets you keep may, at a horrific point in the future, actually be the ones with no counterparty risk. I could go a little deeper into that, but that could obviously potentially could be private companies. It's the bus you don't see that gets you. Okay, here's a little bit of insight. Boy, like, why are my decabillionaires buying and creating international banks and insurance companies? I think they know something. Well, one of them I helped to purchase a bank in Switzerland. That was a complicated process. I would definitely look at Liechtenstein and Switzerland. I have reasons for that. We don't have enough time to get into that. That may relate a little bit to my sovereign risk and disaster preparedness. But again, if the family is concerned about generational family continuity, these are going to be part of the things to diversifying and hedging certain risk and having an ear to the grindstone of effectively what's happening around the world. Now, family offices do have some massive advantages. Unlike some institutions and others, they're unburdened, I'd like to hope, by short-term performance. like many institutional investors, and they're uniquely positioned to explore more longer-term, unconventional, even impact-driven investments. Again, look at my earlier interview with Octavian Pallotti. Go to my YouTube platform. The Habsburg family, that's also on my YouTube platform when I was in Vienna last month. I mean, they give you some of the secrets and insights that help them be generational even after some of their assets were frozen or taken from them or family members were simply eliminated. All these things happen in a long enough time horizon. I said that earlier. Everything effectively goes to zero. Name me a company now. Give me a long enough time horizon, and maybe hundreds of years. It's going to go to zero. Yeah, Howard Marks mentioned very low interest rates have distorted the behavior of economics and market participants. Things that shouldn't have been built were built. And now we're having a lot of problems. We're seeing the convergence of macro and economics and geopolitics come into play. And as a family office executive, even if you're not the leader, you have to be familiar with these things. Forget about one side of the aisle or the other. They're both messed up. So think for yourself. That's what another billionaire told me in one-on-one, also in one of my interviews. Now, the challenge with that, and that's someone who went to MIT, the challenge with that is, are you thinking for yourself with information that has been polluted by others, and the only inputs you have are effectively anchoring or confirmation bias? That's a deeper psychological issue that maybe we have a little time during my longer platforms to go into and bring on someone who's really, really good at it. I love the great Sir John Templeton. He used to chuckle, this time is going to be different. But he meant that to be sarcastic. But he did know that about 20% of the time, how the world works and how we make decisions may actually need to change. That's 1 in 5. That's a lot. And given the pace of things today and what's going on, I think that's even higher now. I'm not going to have the time to go into a deeper economic dive, geopolitics and military into US dollar hegemony. It's obvious we've been a unipolar world effectively for a long time, and that's changing. It's probably becoming more unipolar with more than two. It is going to be a threat to the US dollar. We're already seeing that happen. But again, we're going to have to. Here's what I will look at: the 1, 2, and 3 at the bottom. What will the new world order look like? How will the transition unfold? And where will the best opportunity arise? And that's where I talk to the greatest economists, military, geopolitical strategists in the world, and I bring them on. But I also look to impart my own thinking for myself, my own collaborative impact with families, those that go back a long time and have seen everything, and try to get some insights from them. Again, we can't cover everything. Nope, I'm going to skip that over. Many of you are going to be most interested in some of my research and the work that I've done with billionaires. So this guy is a billionaire. He's an incredible investor. On the investing front, he mentions 4 things that gave him great wealth: discipline, controlling emotions, having an edge. That was a really important one he mentioned, and managing bankroll. Given the inevitable economic depression in the West, his words, you have to look at what assets will be available at reasonable prices. And for a family office that wants top-tier talent, who will be available to manage and lead these assets, given inevitably over time a decline in population and retirement happening? I'm probably looking at the time. Let's see. Oh, yeah, we're coming to an end in about 7 more minutes. So we got time. I'm going to have to skip over this section on the rising generation. I will hint at this: money, legal, and family. Scott Peppett in FFI wrote about that. I loved it. He basically said families, offices spend about 90% of their time on the money and legal and 10% on the family. And he said he's being generous on the 10%. I basically agree with him. So the greatest threat to the family is the family. That goes back to shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. But the greatest advantage to the family is the family as well. If that's the case, how come 10% generous of a family office's time is dedicated to the family? Where's the chief learning officer? Where is teaching capacity and capability in the rising generation? And I think I mentioned it here. I'll mention one. Are the rising generation, are they being educated on what kind of businesses make for great investments and how to properly value and manage those kind of investments? And could you, as a CIO or someone in the family office, be of value generationally to family continuity of the rising generation? Again, I'm going to have to skip over a lot of this. In the family, the number one thing that you could teach, and all these 500-year-old plus families taught me this in Europe, it's character. Be there as a parent. You can't outsource your parenting. Build character. That's on you as a parent. That's not the family office's responsibility. The parent has to take responsibility for that. Bad SFOs are destroyed by crisis. Good SFOs survive them. And great SFOs, I mean, they're improved by them. They may not come out always financially stronger, but they get stronger in other ways, and they'll get the finances readapted and right. And again, I'm blowing through this very quickly. I know many of you wanted me to cover the virtual family office, which still needs the structure. And structure in a family office is very, very important. First of all, you have to be asking, I don't care if you're virtual or not, can we do this internally? Can we do this excellently? And should we do this internally? If you're not looking to be great at your core competency of what you do, you become great or you outsource it. I mean, I really simplify that. Okay, before I get to my comment here, because it's a little bit biting, we just don't have the time to go into how do you set up the investment assets in terms of structuring and LLCs, the SFO management company as a C Corp in a state probably like Delaware, New Hampshire, Wyoming, South Dakota, Alaska, and there's a couple of others. There is art and science to that. When I meet with the most successful families, I get their legal and accounting information. I follow up with those people who are titans of the industry, and I learn from them. So look at my interviews with some of the great people at McDermott. Look at my interviews with Tom Handler. Look at my interviews with Richard Levine and many others at Withers Bergman to understand some of the issues on structuring in a family office. And that gets a deep, deep dive intertwined with private trust companies in my deeper, 24, even my 4-hour masterclass goes a fair amount into that. So here's my biting comment. I believe in the promise of a virtual family office. I believe in technology is going to be incredible. And by the way, I got a whole module. I could do 4 hours on technology. I might give you the quickest glimpse of it a little bit later in my remaining 3 or 4 minutes. But I'm going to make a biting comment. Remote family offices are often bullshit. They don't work. How are you going to teach younger people culture? How are you going to ingrain with them? How are they going to come up with creative ideas if they're remote? You're looking to make your life easier. Stop the cap. If you're not so young, that means just stop the lie. Stop the lie to yourself. Is it possible it could work? Sure. Do I think I know the secrets to make it work? Well, yes, of course. But do I think it's easy? Do I think that remote SFOs are often excellent? No, I don't. Again, we're going to skip over. Heck, here's a random fact. If I was talking more about global issues, there's 700 single-family offices in the tiny country of Singapore. 700. How many do you think there were 10 years ago? I think it was under 100. And 20 years ago, like 2. Times are changing, become more global. I'm going to have to skip over the importance of family governance. And my final, before we go to Q&A, my final 3 minutes, I'll try to leave it a little bit biting and maybe even controversial. Average family offices want to be left alone. Good family offices want to be mentored. Great family offices want to be told the truth. Why family offices fail? Please understand. Now, I know everything fails, like I said, 3 times in a long enough time horizon. But the time horizon in a family office is often it's going to fail in 10 or 15 years. It could be lack of engagement with the rising generation. It could be solving the wrong problems. Remember, that's very important. A lack of communication, lack of leadership. The buck has to stop somewhere. Now, at the end of the day, it really stops at the family principle. If your family office is not good, it's on you. It's your fault. But if you're the executive, get over, learn competency, understand your blind spots, move ego aside. You could be great. I've been in hundreds of family offices. I consulted and created 20 of them. I've traveled the world. I'm telling you, they often fail, and that's the reason why. Undisciplined family offices don't work. You need to reprioritize around your core goals, I would say every morning. That would be something that I teach on project management. We're not really going to have the time to get in there, but there was one thing that I wanted to really leave you with before we go to, well, I guess I'm being a little comical here. In the end, only 10% of people around you, including advisors and fellow executives, add any value, to enhancing your best practices and your outcomes. The remainder, which is 90%, waste your time, if not downright confuse you. People are not the most important asset. As Colin said, the right people are. Be someone who sees problems and wants to fix it, because most people see problems and effectively want to burn it all down. I already mentioned, you don't have a how problem 99%. You have a who problem. Okay, I'm going to leave on this slide, and I may briefly show my technology stuff. Okay, you want the one tip to effectively run an effective family office. So I'm going to leave it with you. I'm giving away my best stuff. But as I learned a little bit from my interviews and knowing Tony Robbins a little bit, I could give it to you, but it's another thing to help me mentor it and help you execute it. But I'm going to give it to you. How do you keep the family office focused on what matters most? And a lot of you are not going to like the answer. It's right there. Daily meetings, even if they're virtual, in the AM, and a daily PM sync meetings are required for everyone on the team, no matter what. What gets measured gets managed. Is that overly top down? I don't care about political correctness. I don't care about what's popular. I don't care about people in a family office crying. You're working, you're getting paid. You have to be the best. Your you now is not the best version of yourself. You need to become the best version of yourself, especially if the family office is a little younger and somewhat unproven. You need this kind of hand-holding. You need to be held responsible. There needs to be project management engage the results of the success and daily to weekly tracking of the steps you're reaching to get to the goals you need to get to. These are all very, very important. Okay, by the way, most thoughts and even actions don't matter. The majority of what you know is probably wrong, and most of what you know that's right doesn't mean shit. Now, I didn't say that, although I agree with it. The great Jonathan Bales did. He's a great gambler, in case you're wondering. That guy is brilliant. We just don't have the time. Well, this one's kind of important. Change is about people, and people are the number one thing in the family office. If the people are not open to change, there will be no change, period. I mean, here are some of my things that I do on technology. It's a lot. Here's what I will say about it. What I will say about technology is very important. It's top 3. Easily, people are number 1. Could I see one day when AI possibly surpasses and technology becomes number 1? Inevitably, but I don't know if that's going to be 5 years or 100 years. What I do know is 10 years ago, it was a little cumbersome and it was expensive. Now there's tremendous competition with technology providers in the family office world. Prices have dropped, quality has improved. Sometimes you don't need a Ferrari. You could have a well-functioning Ford, save a truckload of money, and By the way, you can have a Ferrari, but if your team doesn't know how to drive it, doesn't use it to its capability, why? Like, do you think that most family offices are that savvy in technology? Most are levering the technology as best they could. They take 2 years to change systems. They're slow. Family offices, I'm beating a dead horse. This is probably one of the reasons why some family office executives don't like me. And I love you all, male, female, doesn't matter, you people. I love the family office community. I love those of you that are in it. I want to work with you and simply help to give you some of the resources and a little bit of my experience to make things better. And if you're new or wanting to be in the family office, I just want you to be great. And I think this goes back to the love of respect for your job, your commitment, your sense of duty, your honor, your character. I think all these things are incredibly important. I wish I could have done even my short 4-hour masterclass on February. If you go to my website at angelorobles.com or my LinkedIn, you'll see I'm starting to promote. I do own Family Office Masterclass, but right now it's lumped into my angelorobles.com. But on the evening, live digitally on February 12th and 13th, so 4 hours in total, 2 hours each night, I'm hosting for me, what's a short 4-hour masterclass. It is deep. It will include guest lecturers and people. And for the low cost I charge, I'm sorry, it's an incredible deal. My ones that are more 24, 26, 30 hours, those are very pricey. For some of you, they may be a good fit. For others, not. You'll make your own decision. I do like to do free stuff for the community. I like to give back. I think Danielle's awesome. And Danielle, I went probably a couple of minutes over my time. If you wanted to open things up or anything in the chat feature, people just come on and talk. I'm good. If you want to do it for 10 minutes, great. For half an hour, whatever works for you.
Now, Angela, you can't hear me.
Yes, I do.
You can. Amazing. Yes. Oh, and no echo. Well, thank you, first of all. I know we are not done, but because I couldn't thank you earlier, that was so insightful. There has been quite an active chat. Lots of people have enjoyed, and there are a few questions, so I'll go ahead. Earlier, you mentioned someone that we should go on to Amazon and research, and it was Jay, possibly Jay.
Sure. Yeah. Hughes, Hughes. So Jay Hughes is probably 79 or 80. He's an elder in the community. He's considered, if there is a Mount Rushmore in the family office world of providing value and service, he's the first person being carved. His books are great. They're a must read. And I'm not the only one. There's others. But if you were to go to even my family office TV platform on YouTube, this summer I did probably his longest digital interview was 1 hour and 38 minutes. And it got a little interesting and controversial at the end. You'll have to listen to the whole thing to find out.
Amazing. All right, we have another question. From a global macro perspective, what strategies could you share on how to mitigate geopolitical risk? Do you think exploiting global macro for investment is reckless or worthy risk for family offices that are competitive?
Yeah, I would probably like to have on people like Mark Spitznagel in my masterclass, who's the founder of Universa, was Nassim Taleb's partner. He's arrogant, he's pompous, but he's damn brilliant. And that's all I care about. I don't care whether they're likable. I know a lot of people that aren't likable, but they're amazing. I know a lot of people that met with Bernie Madoff. They felt he was a great guy and they invested. He's a total effing fraud. So who cares whether you like me or whether you like people? Look to get the right information, no matter how they are. That's a very complicated question. I partially answered it with having incredible, deep macro thinkers that I believe in and trust. And then at the end of the day, even still filtering the information, forming a thesis, and thinking for yourself. But that's too boring of an answer. So if I had to give you a little more context, I would say probably 95% plus of your of your assets are denominated in US dollars. And that's worked pretty damn well for a long time. That's not going to last forever. You need to have greater diversity. I would look at owning businesses in select countries that are income producing businesses, perhaps in specific sectors. We don't have enough time to get into that. I would have multiple currency plays, definitely the Swiss franc, possibly the Singapore dollar, maybe the Norwegian krona, and there's others. Yes, although it's bit me in the butt, but also has done me well, I would have some in Bitcoin. I would consider the Web3 ecosystem. I would look at supply chains. If you're a gigantic billionaire family, I would look into robotics. I would look into drones. I would look into warehouses. But you could still be active in various public companies and other smaller, as even a sub-billion-dollar family. Now, in my sovereign risk and disaster preparedness, we go deep into that. That's a pretty scary masterclass, by the way. And that's a premium. That's a very, some would call it expensive, but it's all relative. Maybe I'll do a condensed 4-hour version of that at some time in the future. I would have multiple passports. I would own real estate and real assets in varying countries. Did I just make your life more complicated? Of course I did. But if you're concerned about these risks, and there's lots of risk around the world and here, meaning here in the US, you need to do the things that you need to do, that I see a lot of the amazing families, brand name families, very quietly and discreetly doing everything that I just mentioned.
Wonderful. There have been a few questions I'll just touch on very quickly. People have asked for your website URL. So yes, that and the recording link, I will be sure to follow up with following the presentation. So you can all learn more about Angelo's masterclasses, and you can also re-access and re-watch the recording. We have a question. What role do you see the family office should play in ecosystem development? Many municipalities, government love to learn and listen to family offices. And what about the role revolutionary family offices should play in innovation and the energy transition?
Wow. I mean, that's a great question, a little bit of a loaded question. And it's going to be hard for me to answer it in a nuanced time frame and to probably do it justice. Where do I start? I mean, at the end of the day, the families make their own decisions. They don't engage the rising generation enough. The rising generation often has different thoughts, different passions, and different desires than the elders. The elders have to do a better job listening and acting with the rising generation, but the rising generation needs to be respectful of what the elders have accomplished, their experiences. It's a two-way street. But I agree, top-down governance, heavy-handed by a family, makes their life easier. It's pretty much assured the family's going to suffer the shirt sleeves in 3 generations. There needs to be active listening. There needs to be adaptations. Most family offices are slow to adapt. They're aligned with the original creating principle. There's no engagement with the rising generation, and the rising generation effectively can't wait to get rid of them. Do I agree with everything that the rising generation is doing? Well, I don't want to make it a political discussion, so I'm probably going to ignore answering that question, at least to a degree. They're doing some things that are probably good, and they're doing some things that are ignorant, and they're making mistakes in. But at the end of the day, it's their process of learning. When I was younger, I made mistakes too, and I learned the hard way. And an elder that would try to guide me and teach me, I might have, flipped them the bird, even if it was a family member, as terrible as that is. Now, of course, if my son were to do that with me, there'll be a reckoning to pay. He's 20 years old, so I kind of know some of the nuances here that you're talking about. Now, if you want to go if you want to get a little nasty on your question there, I'm going to reposition it a little bit. Do families of great wealth do philanthropic initiatives that have an ulterior purpose that sometimes not just a great tax advantage, but provide them an opportunity to influence? I did list philanthropy earlier as what the super rich could do now to influence more of the masses and potentially cause societal, political, and regulatory change that benefits them. People in power pass laws to benefit the people who are in power making the laws. Not a surprise. Now, I'm a pretty hardcore libertarian, so I believe in freedom and free rights, and I respect other people's perspectives and points of view. I learn from everyone. Everyone in the world knows something that I don't know, that I could learn from them. So your question is complex. I can't do it justice in 3 or 4 minutes. I touched upon little parts of the periphery of it. From a societal unrest perspective, once the average person is spending 40% or more of their income on food, you will have an uprising. Remember, I said I'm active in history. Look at the French Revolution, look at the Russian Revolution. What happened to the super rich for the most part, especially during the Russian Revolution? They were eliminated. Now, I could be a little nice and say their assets were taken from them, they were depowered, but sometimes they were literally eliminated. There's way more have-nots than there are haves. In theory, they're going to control the vote. There needs to be a sense of balance and care when it comes to wealth inequality. And I'm the last person into certain things that are happening today. But again, I try to keep an open mind and I look at the facts and the statistics. And I know what happens when that wealth gap grows and uprisings occur. It's not going to be a good outcome. Why don't I leave it at that?
Thank you, Angelo. There's been tons of overflowing comments. People are very thankful for your wisdom. They love your insights. They like your unapologetic views. Someone has already bought Jehu's book, so thank you for that. Let's see, here's a quick answer. Who is the leader of the Rockefeller single family office you indicated we should study?
So that's an interesting story. I believe the Rockefeller family office was created in 1883. I might be a year or two off. And the person they chose to head the family office was not in taxes, not in estate planning or legal, and not in finance. It was a preacher, and his name was Frederick Gates. And he was the perfect person for that family at that given time. He was a leader of people, an active listener. He knew how to communicate, and he brought in the resources that he needed to. He didn't need to be an expert on everything. No one is. In the NFL or football, that would be kind of a quarterback. But you have people around you, the offensive line, the receiver, the tight end, the running back, that are more than complementary, all part of a team. But there needs to be someone who effectively is coordinating things and leading it up. But this has been wonderful. And if you had one or two more questions, trust me, I do have enough time. But I really appreciate all of you in the audience. Again, I'd like to give Danielle a hand. She's doing a great job. I learned so much from her writing and the work that she does, and it's been very, very helpful for me. I appreciate all of you. I've been in the community a long time. I have those that love me. I have probably those that don't like me so much. Angelo's loud and a little pompous and a little over the top. I'm passionate, and I'm not here to please everyone. I try to tell things like they are from my perspective, which means I'm wrong a fair amount. And I learn from that and I adapt and I move forward. But hopefully I share some insights. I look at the community, and I know I was a part of it for so long. And I don't know, just hosting events and having sponsored speakers and generic programming, there's no deep intellectual rigor there. There's no best practices. Everything's down the middle. There's nothing controversial per se on geopolitics or the economy. It's lacking. And I want to hold the industry to a higher standard. I want to hold myself to the highest standard. I go back to what I said about being a historian, but also marrying it with having a revolutionary, having some spark in you that challenges current thinking. And that's what I look to do. So I'm very active on social media. You could all find me. I appreciate Danielle. My website's right there. It's angelorobles.com. And more is going to be coming up on the work that I do one-on-one in coaching and my master classes. Even if you just do nothing but go to the website and follow my LinkedIn, a lot more to follow.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Angelo. I look forward to all that is to come. And, with Family Office List, our goal this year and kicking off our MasterClass series is really just to help shine the light and share wisdom and knowledge. It's an ever-evolving sector, so we couldn't be more grateful for your presentation today, and we look forward to doing more with you.
You're the best, and don't forget, what did I say earlier? When you shine the light, there will be shadows. And shadows is where the risk lie and potentially also the opportunity. And I just want the industry to think more creatively, think more revolutionary, think more that just because things are or were doesn't mean they will be moving forward. How the world works is changing, and it feels, my God, it feels almost like it's changing every day. And it's both scary, but I also see opportunity. But on that note, enough from me. I think you're great, and I look forward to following your upcoming other masterclasses as well.
Yes, thank you, Angelo. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Next week, hopefully you can all tune in. We'll be hearing from Ronald Diamond, also another great thought leader in the space. I will share that announcement with the recording link as well. And yeah, what a great session. Sorry for the rocky start with the technology, but so glad we finished on a high note. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll look forward to meeting again.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.